Hello again, hocam. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
Not bad. I'm okay. I'm an academician in Izmir in Turkey, and we've started the semester, and it's busy as usual. So that's it. And how are you?
Thank I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking time for Bubblegum's first interview, actually. I want to start with my first question. How did you write a thesis about Hammam? What drew you to the subject?
Okay. That was a question I asked myself, and actually, I planned to describe it in my thesis, but then later on, with my supervisor, we decided not to put it there. It will be too
Hmm.
personal. That's the thing. But I come from a modern family. I mean, with my parents, I never visited a bath because we had our own bathrooms at home, like many
Hmm.
other modern families. So we didn't
Hmm.
have that tradition. But in the year 2000, one of my friends, a gay friend of mine, uh, like in age of 30s, he took me to a hammam in Izmir. And he
Hmm.
said that, look, this is a very private space and it's a male environment. Of course, the hammams are, traditionally they're separated in men's section and women's section. In That's the history of it. It's not something new. But
Hmm.
he took me to that place. Um, I was little bit anxious before because I didn't know what's gonna happen there the first time I go to such a place. But I think I was lucky because I graduated from architecture department from METÜ in that year, in the year 2000. So I was a very young architect, just graduated. So not only the environment itself, all this desire, intimacy, and all these issues related to that space, but the space itself as an architectural space uh, made me very, to become interested in that topic actually. And later on, when I started write PhD program at METÜ, and with my supervisor, my area of specialization is mostly gender and space. So she told me what to study, okay, and she asked me what I'm going to study, and I said, well, I think I feel more comfortable and confident in studying on a subject which I have experienced myself as a space. So that was the whole starting point. I decided to work on the space which I had the chance to go and experience rather than reading it from someone else. So that made my life easier actually throughout the PhD process. And I actually, to my students that I'm supervising, I always recommend that. It's important to choose a case in such a, extensive research, to choose a case which you know better, a space that you already know and experience, and that gives a sense of you can internalize that topic in that way. That's the whole story.
Okay, so did you keep repeating going to Hammam afterwards, that 2000 Izmir one, in
Yeah, yeah.
different
And
Hammam?
later on, I kept going. I started visiting other baths. I asked myself why I didn't, have any other chance. I never, been to a hammam before. And in other cities, in Istanbul, in Ankara, such spaces. And of course, more or less, a typical Turkish bath is similar in terms of space. But locality, I mean, the people going there, the subculture actually is
Mm.
very different in Istanbul, in Ankara. Also, when I went abroad to other cities to see the counterparts of hammams actually in other cities. For instance, in US, it's more called like steam baths or
Mm.
bathhouses. In London, there are many. And in other cities, I had the chance to see the counterparts of those cultures. Of course, the European understanding and also the American understanding is quite different. So the way they practice is different there. So the hammam still keeps its tradition. For instance, I used to work in Libya for a while, and in Libya, that tradition, hammam tradition, which goes back to the Ottoman times when the Ottomans had occupied Libya, they still continue that tradition. So the spatial layout, the rituals, for instance, the scrubbing ritual, and the soaping and scrubbing ritual is more or less the same. So that was always my, interest. Whenever I have time in Turkey or in any other city, I visited those spaces.
I have another sub question actually about this. Did you have the perspective of someone doing a research about Hammam when you go there and experience the space? Or did you just go there to experience the space and have a bath and
Hmm.
to do
That's a
something
good
else?
question.
Mm,
That's this is a problem of a researcher. It has always been a problem for a researcher. From which position you're going to relate to your thesis topic, okay? As a user or as a researcher, as an outsider? Um, Actually, both, and I had to make a balance, right? Because if you are making let's say, a blind ethnographic research without telling you are the researcher to other people, it's not something ethical because that's an intimate place and it's the private place of people. But in other sense, then the users there or the attendants, for instance, in the bots, they wouldn't give you the information you want in that
mm,
sense. So I try to be a little bit political in that sense. So, but while doing this, the mostly the LGBT activist institutions in here in Turkey and the organizations, they helped me a lot in doing that. So I had to make, they need to trust me first, right? I had to make this relation between people. Uh, they while they are telling me all those stories that you might have read in my thesis,
mm,
uh, they will first believe that that will be only used for a research, such a research. And but on the other hand, at certain times I try to be friends with them, trying to understand their intentions, their memories and so on. So, uh, as a researcher, at certain times I was outside the topic, have a distance to the topic itself and the case. But at certain times, I behaved like I am part of it. Actually, I was part of it because without visiting and without being part of that subculture and community, you will never be able to make such a research. That's for sure.
absolutely. And when you said LGBT had to have a certain kind of trust in you, do you also mean that there are certain hammams that are LGBT safe and not safe coded, and this is kind of known in the community, and people would suggest you to go there and not, for example?
Definitely, people choose certain
Mm.
bots. But for instance, I wrote my thesis in 2014, and now it has been like 11 years, right? Most of the spaces are closed now. They closed down. So that is really critical because you gather a certain knowledge about those private lives, even though it's like you never decipher their names, identities, and whatever. But even in that sense, you should be very careful because those spaces in such a place in Turkey where LGBT rights are under certain threaten always, you have to be very careful about that. That's why you need to construct this trust relationships between people. If
in
they
order to
feel that, this will create a problem in future, okay, those knowledge can be somehow exposed or whatever, then it creates a problem. But there are certain ways in writing a thesis, for instance, that's valid for all types of thesis, but particularly for such ethnographic research. Uh, on one hand, there is authenticity of the work itself that you need to keep on, but on the other side, there are ethical regulations. You have to keep all the identities, names secret. But there is such a balance actually. So, but I had good communication with people. I think I can say that I was really successful and lucky in doing that, right? Um, Not every person would want to deal with such a work, okay? Uh, they don't want to take such risks. That's one thing.
it is risky, of course, in order to keep the safety, I was going to say, within a community, there has to be a mutual trust that is built. And if you are a kind
Yeah.
of a stranger in that community, even if
Hmm.
you kind of declare that you are a part of that community, there has to be a trust building time, I guess. Coming back to the spatial experience, what kind of a spatial experience are we talking about from a personal perspective? What
Hmm.
was the thing that you were wowed about Hammam in your first
Hmm.
experience, or maybe by time you realized that it was that?
Okay, I told you that I had just graduated from architecture department. So the way we learned architecture, and this is something global, is a modernist understanding of architecture. So when we define a space, design a space, and talk about a space, there are certain norms that have been constructed, like it should be functional. It should have a certain way of aesthetics. It should have proportions, blah, 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 those kind of things. But when you go to such a space, first of all, the first hammam I've been, and then I went to other hammams, uh, these spaces are not very clean in the way we understand them. So, first of all, if you go to a traditional one, a historic one, actually. It's very old. If it's not has not been restored, renovated, those spaces are under humidity, under certain conditions. They are not very sterilized in the way we understand architecture. So that made me to think about that. Look, this is what I learned about architecture, but this is the reality. So we are talking about other spaces here, not the daily spaces in the daily routine. So, but what is unique about a hammam is that uh, even though it's a very, very small space, it's not an extensive space, it's not big architecture, let me say. It's a very small architecture, both in terms of its scale and the way it works is just for public bathing reasons, right? People go there. But the temperature gradation inside the space, the light, the diffused light coming from the ceiling, the acoustics, the materiality, the stone itself. I had read Richard Sennett's Flesh and Stone that made me really, I mean, that is one of my favorite books, by the way. The stone itself, stone is the oldest material in the world. And uh, if your body contacts with stone, right, it's not a very mere experience. It's a very dense and experience that is stored in your memory actually. So all these issues of multisensory environment actually made me think that look, it's not as simple as it is. It is a very rich space, both in sensual terms and also in terms of memory. I hadn't really thought about the relation between memory and space until I been to a hammam. Once those spatial ambience, the experience is stored in your memory, for instance, you remember the smell, you remember the how the humidity feels on your skin, okay? All your bodily experience there is stored in your memory, and at each time you go there, you have an expectation in each hammam to have the same ambience. In most of them, you cannot have it if they are renovated, restored, painted, or whatever. But I like it. I like it dirty, actually, in the way it is. That makes it very unique, actually. The traces of humidity, the damp on the walls, right? The way the stone is like more than 200 years old, the same stone, the same marble there. The water itself, it still gets, if it's a thermal bath, it still gets the same source of water from the thermal spring, the source. That is very interesting, actually. I mean, it's like uh, you cannot see this any other spaces, you know. But when I say any other spaces, I of course mean the way we are taught, the way how the spaces should look like. Okay, so in that sense, I feel really lucky to have experienced such a space, right? Otherwise, I mean, I would be just studying ordinary spaces around.
In what you said, what was interesting about me the most was the fact that the naked body is getting in contact with hot stone. First of all, there is the degree of temperature, and then there is the texture of the material. And I am assuming that within different parts of Hammam, that experience is also different. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a little journey that you are creating for yourself in a
yeah.
multi-sensory way, right?
Yeah, a typical hammam, which is called a Turkish bath, actually. They were built on the actually their their precedents are the Roman baths in Anatolia because they've got the same sequence of spaces. Uh, for instance, the entrance space is called frigidarium, which is the equivalence of the cold room, the entrance in the Turkish bath. And
Mm-hmm.
then the tepidarium, for instance, is the warm. It's not hot, it's not cold, but it's warm. It's a transition space. In Turkish baths, it's called the warm room, and in Turkish, it's ılıklık,
Mm.
the water is that way. And the kaldarium is the hottest space. In Roman baths, it's the equivalence is yes, it's kaldarium. In the Turkish bath, it's the hot room, sıcaklık it's called. It exactly follows the same triple, let's say, spatial sequence, but it is very logical on one hand because this triple spaces, it's a transition from the cold to the hot. So it makes the body to get adapted to the environment. Okay. For instance, in some cultures, we don't have that. For instance, if you are using a sauna in Finland, okay, you go to the sauna, it's quite hot. And then to have a shock effect, you directly go into the snow or the cold lake, right? So it creates a shock effect. But in our culture, the body has to get adapted to it, right? That is something very unique. So that is already the body starts expecting this. In a way, it actually shapes our body, right? or makes it prepared for such an experience. That's one thing. The second important thing is the water itself. In Islam religion, that's why in most of the hammams, um, the still water is not used. Still water in the way that we use in the pools, right?
Hmm.
That makes it different from Roman and Greek baths and other baths in European cultures. It should be moving water.
Also in Russian baths, there was this
Yeah,
shocking effect, right? With the cold plunges.
yeah. That is something related to climate, by the way.
Mhm,
Both in
makes sense.
Russia and Scandinavian countries, it comes from that culture is based on the climatic issues. Like it's too cold, so they find a way to live with it.
Yes. Also in Chinese medicine, it's not advised, especially for female bodies, to do the cold plunges and shocks. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming that there is a cultural difference coming from Asia and Europe as well in the understanding.
yeah, probably.
You talked about the different rooms and running water. What about the light in different rooms? How is
Hmm.
the light coming into the scene? Is it always something that we're looking up and that majestic, beautiful light that is in the that is coming in the vapor, let's say? Is it like
Mhm.
that in all of the rooms, or do you experience the light in a different way as well?
Well, the first one, because in all of the baths I visited, if they are traditional Turkish baths, there are no windows on the side walls.
Hmm.
Light always comes from this, which is called the elephant eye openings at the top of the dome. And it comes this diffused light, right? And it touches the steam there and it creates, like you said, magnificent ambience inside the space. That makes it very attractive, very picturesque, one end, this scenery. And in most
Absolutely.
of the photographs, you must have seen it. That's the very stereotypical image of the bath, that the light is coming from the top and the person is just lying on the belly stone in the center and it touched the skin, but there is also the steam itself. So it somehow depicts this multisensory atmosphere of the bath itself. Uh, yes, the light quality is always like this because it's very private place. But in such spaces, but while people are naked, for instance, mostly, I mean, compared to other cultures, other, let's say, types of baths I visited in Europe and in US, they are the same. Light is not an issue. And in the Turkish bath, what is interesting is, uh, if there is enough daylight coming, I mean, if it's not a rainy day, there
Hmm.
is the cloudy day, they still that light coming through, the lighting is based on this. They don't use any artificial light.
Hmm.
But for instance, in other baths in other cultures, they prefer to use artificial light. It's the same for sauna, for instance. In sauna, there is no way you can take a daylight, so that is artificial light. But what makes the hammam unique in that sense is the daylight. You can control the daylight and still use it throughout the day, right? And what is interesting is that since it's a dome structure at the top, uh, light comes from a certain angle, but when it drops inside, you know, you would never know from which direction it's coming. That's the
Hmm.
interesting part. That's why, and since there is no clock inside and your watch, you can understand the time, right? It's you are completely free of what is it called? Our routine, okay, our daily life. So, for instance, you can go there at 1 o'clock and you can spend like 2 hours, but you don't really care about it when you're inside, right? Uh, because you don't understand whether it's late, it's early. That's not the point there, you know.
It makes you lose the track of time and hence
Exactly.
creates the experience unique,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
because you are
yeah,
out of your routine,
yeah.
understanding, perception.
Mhm.
Um, if we move on to the weird space
Hmm.
function of Hammam, what is a queer space and what does it mean to someone outside of academic theory and how we put Hammam in this context?
Okay. Um, in dictionary definition, queer means there are different actually definitions for that, but it's mostly used for gay people. You know that queer they are out of the normative heteronormative identities, and it used to be. It was mostly used, let's say, in 18th or 19th centuries when it was first in the literature. It was used as a slang term to other those people in a negative manner. But what is interesting is in 1960s, it's somehow after the critical turn in academia, starting with the feminist activism, the feminist theories, then post-colonial theories, post-structural theories, and then LGBT studies, and finally the queer studies. Throughout this transition in 1960s, queer, that slang term, now become a term that is a concept that is used in academia, right?
It's
So that
reclaimed.
yeah, and now it is more, let's say, what's it called? Uh, I don't want to say legal, but it's more like it became formal because it was,
Hmm.
generally in academia, people don't like to use words where ordinary people are using, but that queer came to the space. But the queer theory itself improved in mostly in Europe, right? And US. There are many big names or queer theory, actually. And in time, it's normalized as well. But after my readings, I realized that the way the term queer is understood, uh, the word queer and queer space is understood in Euro-American cultures and mostly in Eurocentric literature is that they are mostly addressed as commodified spaces or ghettos, right?
Hmm.
Where only LGBT people live, and that is their safe spaces. And this is the way it's constructed in the literature itself, and the examples or cases given are the same. For instance, Soho in London. Okay. It's like it's where all these LGBT bars, the communities are located. It is considered a queer space in the way the Europeans understand them because it's a commodified space. People go there, visit that space. If they want to go there, they go there. They pay their money, and and it's known by the community. So those who don't want to go there, they just don't go. But but in this sense, queer is used as a noun or an adjective. But I prefer to use queer as a verb.
Hmm.
That's why I call this queered. Because after my readings on non-European geographies or third world geographies, as defined by the European literature mostly, or in post-colonial literature, in those countries, generally, most of them are like Arabic countries or countries where there is a conservative society, right? And these gender issues are really critical. In these societies, you wouldn't have such ghettos, right? Which are defined, protected by the authorities, which are known by people. In such countries, such spaces like hammams, Turkish baths, or parks, or bars, or clubs, or adult movie theaters, those are hidden in between the daily, let's say, no, I used the wrong word. They are more like underground spaces, okay? Um, they need to be explored with the sub-communities. So they don't work like ghettos. So there is one definition for that. If you use the queer as a verb, right? Uh, it's a very Foucaultian, let's say, approach. Because if you use the verb like this, you don't see it as a fixed space, a functional fixed space for a purpose, but a momentary space, an ephemeral space that can happen anytime, anywhere, right? That makes it queer. And also, I further think about whether queer only applies to gendered spaces, and I found it's not. Any space where the patriarchal norms or the power is subverted has the potential to turn into a queer space. So this means they can be queered. For instance, Gezi Park, I don't remember when was it. Was it in 2015? This Gezi Park went there.
13.
13, yeah. Gezi Park, for a certain period of time, it was queered for me. Why? Because it's a public space, it's a park. That is how we normally use it, but for a certain period of time, it became home. For people, they went there, they with their tents, they made a library there, they cooked there, they slept there throughout the day. So that is something, that's a way of subverting the uh, the normal conditions of a space, a park. A public park may become your home. In summary, I prefer to use it as a verb, not as a fixed space, a functional space, but a space that can be a space, momentary space that can change anytime, anywhere.
And in Hammam context,
Huh.
how does it become queered?
Okay, that's a good question. Even though we know that some hammams are occupied by LGBT people, that is not something open, you know. That is something those people who visited know, okay? Those part of the subculture. Normally, Turkish baths and hammams, like many similar spaces, they are considered as public spaces, right? Anyone can go there. So you would not expect all the men or all the women visiting the hammam to engage in, intimate relations or casual sex there. You cannot do it. You have to be very careful. Those things happen if there is a potential there, right? And performance itself is very important. And maybe you read in my thesis that there are various types of performances in such spaces, which makes it queer for a very limited time. For instance, eye contact is important. Eye contact means you mean something to that person. Cruising itself is interesting, mostly happens in parks, for instance, but inside the hammam, cruising happens, because if you are cruising, scrolling around and walking all the time without sitting and bathing yourself, it gives a message. It says that I am looking for someone, right? Voyeurism, to see someone else's. But these are all, can I say, like gestures or bodily, let's say, performances that gives the message that the space can be queered, but that is something hidden behind the screen, right? On the stage itself, it is just for a public space for bathing, so everyone can go there. A person can go there, would not expect any kind of such relations, just visiting for that purpose, right? So that is really interesting.
What I'm reading is within the space, there's a form of performance that is created. We have a performer or multiple ones as bodies, and someone watching as well as the audience. So the end user of that communication, let's say, if something is shown, somebody is also receiving it. So it's kind of like a dialogue in between, right?
Yeah.
It needs multiple people, and when those bodies come together, somehow through reading the patterns of behavior, we understand that there's a certain structure.
Yeah, for sure. But one thing that makes it different from a theater stage, let's say, is yes, literally, there might be the performers and the audience, that for sure, but not necessarily, because within the space, every user has the potential to become a performer, by the way. And there is no pre-written text for this play, right? Nobody
It's
knows what to play.
improvised.
Yeah,
Yes.
it just happens there. It's so that is really interesting. So I called it as a performance stage, but I also explained that it's different from a stage. Yes, some of the performers might be dominating the play, that's for sure, and some might prefer just to be an audience, right? Just watching what is going on, not active, maybe a passive, let's say, uh, user there. But in any case, this performance, this play within the space, including this cruising, eye contact, following someone, doing something, touching or not, or having very mere casual sex there. Well, each user has the potential to be part of this play, right? And there are
So
such,
that
I think, I'm not an expert on theater, but I know such plays where the audience may become part of the play itself. The performers actually go there and have a close contact with the audience. In the Hammam, that is the way I understand queering of the Hammam. That's the way it occurs there, right?
it does
In a
open
salon.
another layer for me. I'm not seeing this as theater, but in performance art also it is quite often um, thought if the audience has a mere audience role or if audience members are also performing in a different way.
Hmm.
So that's a discussion topic for us as well, which I'm thinking that applies to Hammam context, because in performance art also it is just you cannot repeat that thing another time. It's just special for that specific environment, that people. If say there are 30 people in Hammam and 10 people in Hammam, of course it's going to be different. Or if it is just three, that's a very intimate one.
Yeah,
All of
for
the
sure.
relations dynamics are going to be different. But when we are talking about these dynamics and this performance stage, historically speaking, was it always like this, or did it get constructed throughout time?
Hmm. That's only also a good but a difficult question to
Mm.
respond because um, you asked me this question why I chose to study Hammam. Uh, and I said that without experiencing, I will never know what type of space I'm studying. So my personal experience is like that. Unfortunately, for those experiences in the past, we can only read them, right? From people's, let's say, travelogues or their narratives, their experiences, and there isn't much in that. For instance, I believe that in Ottoman times there were such relations, but maybe shaped in different ways. Those performances were maybe different. For instance, tellak, the person who scrubs and gives a massage to the person, um, they were mostly effeminate people, chosen from those effeminate people. And there is a book on this, which is called Sex in Ottoman. And there is a part, actually, a chapter on that. And that was kind of a norm because those tellaks, they were young, very young, until they come to a certain age. Having such a contact with them was considered uh, was not considered immoral in that society. So old men visiting the hammam were having such contacts. It was considered as normal. But there is only one book chapter I know about it. I believe that in the Ottoman archives there are many of them, but they are unfortunately kept secret in the Topkapı Palace archives, fortunately, because I struggled a lot to access them, and most of the historians actually told that. So that's the issue. The another issue is in Turkish, in our society, compared to the European society, we don't have a habit of writing what we experience. That's why uh, all this information is lost in words, okay, verbally. It's like writing on the water, okay? So there isn't much experience. But what I feel, I had the chance to some clues, some evidences regarding those experiences, and this tellak issue is one of them, that's for sure. And also, I searched for what was happening in the women's section because, in Ottoman society, mostly in those Ottoman baths, it was the only place women can visit. And it was regulated by the hadiths, actually, in the society. And because those women were going there in groups, they were getting prepared before. It's like the extension of the home, the domestic space into the hammam space. They are preparing food. It was like a beauty center for them, like they were bathing, cleaning each other, and so on. And they are making music there. They can spend the whole day. Today, what is called in Turkish, but I don't know exactly the English name, Kabul Günü, for instance, when the ladies come together and they cook, they make gossip, they talk.
May I interrupt you with one thing? Because I will
Yeah.
have more questions about women and I want to take a bit
And I jumped
more
into that,
time
sorry.
in it. But I kind of like got hang on to the Taylak image coming from Ottomans. What I know in contemporary Turkish culture is that Taylak is more like bear, like a really big,
Yeah.
hairy guy that could give you a very harsh massage, like this is
Mhm.
what I would imagine it as
Mhm.
a young
More
Turkish person, I would
masculine.
say. Yes. How did that change then throughout the time? Do you have an idea?
Well, probably, probably in the 19th or 20th centuries, into transition in the modern times. Then, probably the tellak image and their working in the hammams and attendance were somehow forbidden. And
Hmm.
those tellaks were mostly not from non-Muslim groups and non-Turkish groups, right? For instance, coming from
Right.
Balkanian countries and so on. Now we know that it's Tokat, the city itself in Turkey, is known for its tellaks. And
Hmm.
those guys, with these masculine looking guys, it's like a tradition for them, from father to son. They are treated in a way to give massage. So it's like a sector there. And I sort of think that through in this modernization process in the 19th century, those kind of, let's say, feminine looking people or those others in the society, try to be erased in a way.
Okay, going back to the part that I interrupted, you said that it was the only safe space women could go to. Around what times are we talking about?
We're
19th
talking
century?
about like Ebu Suud, the religious leader. You know, there's in many in Islamic societies there are such leaders, and he was giving this, writing those regulations and giving the speeches and so on. Since because of this harem and selam, you know, division in the Ottoman society, and women had no chance to go out, for instance, for apart from some exception. According to regulations, the women were allowed to go out to visit a hammam and stay there for the whole day, right? So the time ranges in the baths were organized accordingly. Men were going in the morning time, and then throughout the day, women were using them. If it was a single bath, by the way, there are different types of bath. There are single baths and double baths. Double bath means there are two baths, one for women and one for men. But the single bath, uh, different sexes can use the bath in different periods of time. So morning is allocated for men, and during daytime for women, and after a certain hour, women have to go their home back, and men can go there, for instance, after dinner until midnight.
So it does exist, a nighttime hammam experience.
Yeah, it does.
Mm.
It still exists in some places in here, but in cities, for instance, they are mostly closed at 9 p.m., 9ish, at certain time. But now this interesting these traditional rituals are became popular again. For instance, this what is it called? The bride tamam ritual, for instance, before they get married. You know, they, for instance, reserve the hammam for a certain period of. They pay for it with their friends. They can go there. A young man before the military service, they can actually close the bath and they can entertain there. That's another ritual. But these are like more popular versions of what they used to do in those times, right? But there are such rituals. One is bride's bath, the soldier's bath, it's called. 14th day's bath is when when the baby is 40 day old. You can take it out, and they take the baby to the bath to wash it. And there are
I didn't know
such,
about this one.
yeah, yeah, there are such rituals actually. These are, let me say, very this these rituals are based on the cultural norms, and they are very formalized in a way, and from tradition. So I think the reason they became very popular is that there are certain gender issues related to that. There are certain issues related to the sexuality of the body itself. For instance, think about the bride bath. They go there because now the girl is becoming a bride. Most probably she had no sexual encounter before. It's the first time they go there. The soldier itself, it's the sign of becoming a man in Turkish society. These are constructed this way, right? What else? There are such, uh, like ablution itself is also something. For the pregnant ladies can also go there if they have some problems, for instance, regarding. So most of these issues are related to the sexuality of the body in the rituals themselves. But that sexuality, I mean, uh, there is this belief that it should be men and women. You know, this binary opposition of the sexes. Apart from that, there is no ritual related to the ritual for gay people, for lesbians, and so on.
But in a way, I kind of think that because the space is binary, it is forcing us to
Yeah.
find a solution to create a safe space within. And that is also how it's coming to a full circle and becoming safe space again, in a way. Maybe not 100% in every single situation, but as you said, temporarily. Going back to the gender of Hammam, in the visual representations of Hammam, what I see is a more female representation is going on in there. Although the painters, for example, most of them are male, and they should not have had that access to the experience of females. Can we say that this is completely imaginary?
We can and we
Yes.
should, because that's a good point, and I think you read it really right, very correctly. You mentioned it that way. Yes, it's imaginary because, first of all these paintings, if you're talking about my article, actually, the most of the paintings I used are by Orientalist painter. And Orientalism or post-colonialism is general, is to create imaginary constructs of the Orient, of the Eastern people, right? So those painters are actually uh, they are they are asked to make those paintings and to represent the Orient from that. So it's completely ideological to represent the Orient in that manner, with those ladies lying. It's like, let's say they are very comfortable, they are naked. Uh, in most of the paintings, actually in the Ottoman times, actually, I wouldn't really think that ladies were completely naked in the
Mm.
baths. But the way in the paintings they are actually presented completely naked, lying there in a comfortable manner, I wouldn't think that will be very easy, because in most of the baths there are private chambers, and those families, if they are, for instance, from the same family, I mean, daughter or mother or sister, whatever, they will just gather in the same chamber, and they can maybe be more comfortable in seeing the naked body themselves. But apart from that, those Orientalist paintings are completely exaggerated, but I just highlight that again, that they are ideological, and they are created to represent the Orient from that perspective. Also, the painters referred to the travelers' narratives in those days. There are many travelers, and I also mentioned them in my article. But those travelers are male travelers, you know. They didn't see the baths as well. Those are all based on what they hear from the others, right? Uh, and they don't have the chance to go and see what's happening in the women's section. There are, what is interesting in the travelogues of female travelers, one of them is Julia Pardoe and the other is Lady Mary Montagu. Uh, they are also manipulated, even though they had the chance to see the women's sections of the Hammam, because of their social status. They wanted to exaggerate that environment. It's again a post-colonial, let's say, attitude doing that. Uh, Manipulating what you see and giving it to the service of the male gaze in general.
I was gonna come to that. I think it's quite easy to read the male gaze looking at many female bodies. in
Yeah.
those forms and shapes and like kind of showing off to each other, their bodies. I think I would even go there and say that. So it is easy to read it that way. Why do you also think that this is like, how do you relate Orientalism and male gaze? Like, what appeals to the Western gaze in there, apart from the male gaze?
Well, um, by the way, I think that male gaze, after a while, becomes free of the gender itself. So
Mm,
it's a gaze, uh, ideologically, let's say, loaded with too many, let's say, preconceptions, bias about the Eastern cultures in that sense. So, but I'm not sure if I got your question right. I started talking, but can you repeat your question in more detail?
I think in your article, there was
Uh-huh.
a part that you were saying you were not necessarily using the male gaze, but you were talking about appealing to a certain Western gaze. Do you differentiate the two?
I do because I mean the in the European actually society this time, I wouldn't really think about that. There might be a female gaze as well, but also if, for instance, there is in post-colonial studies and in Orientalism in general, there is a hierarchy. Okay, if you male is dominant over female, that's one hierarchy. Uh, but it's more complicated. A white female is dominant to a black male, for instance.
Okay.
That makes it different. You understand? So that gaze does not have to be necessarily the gaze of the that person's sex, but that male gaze is embedded with too many ideologies in it. For instance, you will remember there's explorations and explorers in 18th and 19th centuries. You know, a European traveler and scientist leaves the country and goes to a land in Asia or in South America and goes there and explores. There are such stories like The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle or other stories. And today, for instance, in Hollywood cinema, we had many examples of such gays. So they go there and uh, they teach people. They are scientists and they know it. They go there and they meet with vernacular cultures, indigenous people there, and they say that, oh, you are not civilized. We are the civilized people, and we are here to teach you. And look, generally all these scientists, these actors are male on one hand, but they always have a female next to them who supports them actually in that. Actually, they don't have the same gaze, but they are supporting the male gaze actually. That's more or less what I can
I
say. So
see.
after a while, it is like it's like patriarchy actually. I mean, once patriarchy becomes a power structure in the society, it doesn't matter whether man or woman support it. It becomes, let's say, normalized and legitimized by all the societies. Most of the mothers, treat their son in such a norm. So to supporting and strengthening patriarchy in the society. So after a
Go
while, it completely gets free from the biological sex, actually.
Absolutely. It also has applications on any other community, not just on females, of course,
Yeah.
patriarchy in the end. Going back to the representation, in the contemporary representation of Hammam, I think it became, I also saw that in your research, a bit of touristic representation of Turkey. Experience the big Oriental hammam in our hotel, and
Mhm.
mainly the usage of female bodies in there. Um, how would you read that? What is changing within hammam space right now compared to the past? And is it just a touristic experience at the moment, or do you think that there's still the aspects of queerness and safety in there?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, I can talk on this like hours and hours, but I'll try to, let's say, summarize as much as I can. Well, yes, there is a touristic issue because after a certain time when we all had our own bathrooms in our houses, of course, now very few people just visit the hammam. Very few Turkish people, even in villages, they don't go there. First of all, it's not very hygienic for them. It may not be. And the second thing is that using water is very expensive. So the hammams lost their, let's say, I wouldn't want to say that, but hammams were really functional in Ottoman society because the bathing function were differentiating from other functions. For instance, it was the same like our bathrooms. They don't have the toilet and the bath in the same space, in the same volume, to distinguish between clean and dirty water,
Dirty.
right? And that is very logical for a society, for public health, actually. But yes, they once they started to lose their popularity, they became another object of, let's say, tourist marketing, right? In Turkey. So when, um, if a friend of yours visits Turkey, like, and says that, okay, now I just want to see, very authentic, very traditional things in Turkey. If you make a list, one of them is taking him or her to the Turkish bath, okay? But his
Absolutely.
or her expectation is like going there, wow, what a, wonderful atmosphere, this light and everything like that, But and there are such baths, uh, even though many big baths in cities like in Istanbul, only serving for tourists because local people do not just go there and visit, and they are very expensive, by the way, because they are for tourists. And normally, the spaces the spaces cannot be used. I mean, in traditional, the space cannot be used by men and women at the same time, but that doesn't apply to tourists.
Touristic ones.
Yeah, they can go there, they can, uh, what they have in their mindset, they can see there. Eating, drinking, singing, and somebody soaping them and so on. It's kind of a very constructed environment. And that uh, also reflects on the new building types after hammams. For instance, there are thermal spa centers, and in those spa centers, we also have hammams. I had another article regarding, but I also mentioned this in my article as well. Now, there is a concept called autoethnography. This concept is by Mary Louise Pratt, and she says that if a local person, starts seeing his or her own culture from the outsider, from the European culture, it becomes autoethnography. So when your friend comes to visit that space, you don't tell her that let's not go there. It's not very authentic. It's very touristic, but let's go somewhere else. Okay? You wouldn't say that because even in our mindset, that list is embedded there. Like taking him or her to a Turkish bath, serving Turkish coffee, smoking nargile. These are like the cliches you can see in many places. So the hammam with its ambience and it's abstracted from its spatiality and becomes a stereotype. The hammam itself becomes a representation. And in those contemporary spa centers, that when they make a hammam, they just write Turkish bath on the door. When you go inside, the only space you see is just one room. The only room you see is the sıcaklık, the hot room section. And there is a fake dome with artificial light coming through. It's the image of the hammam which is marketed. It's not the hammam itself. That's an issue. But of course, I mean, if we have time, we can talk about like other tropes like this. It's not only the hammam which is marketed to the Europeans in that way. Many, let's say, cultural norms, let's say, spaces in Turkey are marketed this way. That's only because we don't know. Actually, it's all about this auto-ethnographic impression that if we don't believe in our culture ourselves, then there is no way we can, uh, tell it to the others. I mean, if we are not using the hammams regularly in our daily lives, and we are not, because we have our bathrooms, then it became touristic, then, there is nothing more to say about it.
Then I would say the functionality of the hammam in the Ottoman times, because for women it was the time that they were only able to spend outside of their homes, and that's why it created another social space. And for men, for other reasons, let's say, this was not a necessity anymore throughout time, because as you said,
Yeah,
first of all, people had their other public spaces, and also it did not have a functionality of bathing. And
yeah,
once that construction has changed, it kind of became once a touristic thing for the outsider, the stranger, to experience it as it was before. But also the same society made it a way of celebrating things. So this like asker gelin, before
yeah.
you become a soldier, before you become a bride, or the 40th day of the baby that it can go out for the first time, because it is more expensive and actually something that is special now, that we wouldn't really do that on a normal day. It became a celebratory thing, which I
Yeah.
didn't think about it in that historical context, that the functionality losing, the losing, loss of function created a new function actually within itself.
So may I link what you say now with performance?
Please
Uh,
do so.
yeah, I, I told about what type of a performance stage the Hammam is. And I said that it's not like a stage and the audience, but anyone can become the performance. There is no such distinguish, not such a formal theater stage. But in the contemporary times, when it became a touristic space, now it is such a theater stage because they show the audience what they want to see, you know. So and there is a text written before. The owners of the hammam say, okay, now we're gonna have these visitors, okay, and they want to make these blah blah blah, and let's create an ambience before they are writing the text with this one. So that performance is completely different what we talked like 30 minutes ago, right?
Yes. Yes, and I am wondering now what it would become as well, like afterwards, you know.
Ah, in feature.
Mm.
Everything is changing. Life is changing. Our let's say norms are changing. Our behaviors are changing. What I realized during the COVID pandemics is that, uh, for instance, we, I mean, since we have our bathrooms at home with having water 7/24 hours. It could be considered, let's say that, I mean, we have a luxury in our homes, but during the COVID pandemic, we just had the chance to see that if you are a crowded family, like not a crowded family, but with your parents and you got two children, our bathrooms are not designed in the way we want to because you cannot use it that way. What makes this traditional baiting, the hammams itself, interesting is that uh, even in the houses there were hammams, by the way. So the baiting function was diverged from the toilet function and uh, washing function, washing your clothes. Now we all have all these functions in a single volume with washing machine, shower, and the toilet, right? Which is not very hygienic. But in traditional times, you had the chance to use them separately, which is very healthy, right? So I think COVID pandemic was, I thought that it will be kind of a milestone to go back and see what's our lives and to question if we are really having a comfort having only one bathroom in our apartments, right? But it didn't happen, and as human beings, we forget things very quickly. So we are now back in our normal lives again. But in the future, I presume that this culture of baiting, public baiting, somehow could become more popular. Even if it becomes like a touristic experience, I will say that, okay, let it be touristic, but let's keep that going. Uh, because, I mean, I wouldn't see that simply as a way of baiting, functional, but it's a social space. It's a space where those patterns of behaviors can emerge. It's a performance space, and it is it creates a richness in our understanding of spirituality. Okay, if we lose such kind of spaces in any culture, not only for Turkish culture, then everything will be the same, right? So, and I see it very valuable, you know. But I don't really know what's gonna happen. I mean, I personally, yes, I prefer to go Turkish baths, the original Turkish baths, traditional ones. But for the last 2 years, I just stopped going because, for instance, those spa centers or public baths now are more healthy, by the way, and I feel more safe, and it's they are more comfortable, by the way. So that it's changing for sure.
It is, yes. I would talk to you another 5 hours, I guess, about this. But thank you so much for all of your insights. I think this was a very, very interesting subject already in
You're
itself,
welcome.
but you and your comments made it even more interesting. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for taking time and sharing your valuable research on
You're
this.
welcome. I mean, this gave me also a chance to, let's say, rethink about what I've written means many times. At each time I'm talking about these subjects, I explore something new for myself. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity, and I feel myself really lucky to be the first person in your interviews. So I wish good luck in the following interviews and the performances as well.